And welcome once again to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod, our final show for the year, 41 weeks of rugby, and this is it. Finishing off with the All Blacks versus Italy. Scratchy performance to finish the year off, and with a stronger side than we probably thought they were going to select as well. Obviously, other results through the weekend. South Africa getting wins, Scotland getting a win over Australia, England going well against Japan, Argentina and France doing well there. So plenty to talk about as far as that's concerned. Plus, we have World Rugby Player of the Year awards with some interesting selections. Yeah, congratulations to Peter Steph du Toit, obviously one of the world's elite players, very deserving of that award, but some of the Dream Team selections are a bit out there. So we'll chat a little bit about that, of course, your questions and of course your awards that you've sent to us over the last few weeks as well, giving away the Players Sports, Gilbert Ball, and also an Eden Park Paris prize pack. So plenty to get into. No further ado, James Parsons, last show for the year. Goodness me, what a rugby year it's been.
We have watched a lot of code this year, and I think it's been a good solid season of code, and we've learnt plenty about, teams at all levels.
Yeah, and Bryn Hall from Japan. Brynna, goodness me, we're going to get into the awards later on, so let's start maybe with the All Blacks. Were you surprised by, considering the fact they had such a strong lineup selected, that they really struggled to deliver against Italy?
I think we were expecting a little bit more dominant performance from the All Blacks with the team that was selected and probably the expectations of us. But look, you've got to hand it to Italy. I think the way that they defended, especially in that first 20 minutes, we got off to a very, very clunky start. But that was in turn from the defensive pressure that the Italians were doing at the breakdown. I think Cam Roygaard early doors, not only him, but that ball was very, very slow. And I don't know if Dripper, you saw this, but their trends, they look to kind of go back to a 21, or how I try to explain that to the viewers is that it would probably be the same way one or two times to then try come back to the short side, maybe third or fourth phase, and they probably just weren't getting what they were probably previewed in terms of, I guess, the breakdown and how slow it was. So, and I guess more so just the clunkiness of our execution again, a lot of turnovers again, especially in the early piece, but predominantly throughout the whole game. I think the flow of the game probably had something to do with it as well. It didn't seem like we were able to play a lot of rugby with how stop-start it was, through errors, through discipline errors, through penalties and all that kind of stuff. So one happy thing that I was happy with was the scrum. It's been a massive weapon for us this year, and I think it actually got us out of a lot of trouble in that Italian game. So the momentum swing that we were able to get back through our scrum was probably one pleasing thing that you do take away from this test match, that the All Blacks did very, very well.
It was a slow start, and I was surprised because when I saw the team, I was actually really excited. It was not like they're just handing caps out left, right and centre. This was their top side as they see it. So it was exciting from that aspect, because normally when they do make a lot of changes, you can expect a clunky performance. So great on that sense, but then I suppose they started slow, but then there's a moment in the middle where they actually just went direct, and they actually did what we spoke about, not to fall into the Japan game trap and try and rush to the edge. And when they did that, they had success. They got gain line, but then the error rate rose, but I think it was probably due to the complexity of trying to score on the first or second phase rather than trying to build that momentum through the middle and then creating that space wide.
Well, I might go straight to our first question from a viewer then, because Scott Pennington has got into that with his email, and Scott will give you the Players Sports Ball for this question. He said, there was a moment in the second half where the All Blacks forwards kept it tight and made metres through the middle. This has traditionally been a way that the All Blacks, when the backline hasn't been working, have managed to get their go forward and get on top once again. However, this was only temporary on Sunday. Is this a coach issue or a player issue, just wanting to be too expansive all the time?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. It's a hard question because, you're not in the room to know what the game plan is and how they're going to play it. But I think we've seen with this All Black side, when they've played well and they've won big test matches, they have been very direct in nature, and using players like, a Patrick Tuipulotu or an Ofa Tuangafasi, even though they're on the bench early in the year against England, they were, I suppose, big markers in terms of getting that gain line control. Obviously, Scott Barrett has a big role in that, and Wallace Satiti has really grown and come of age in that space. So I actually think it suits the players that were selected. I don't have an answer because whether it's a player or a coach issue. I think you could sense the frustration from Jason Holland at half-time and maybe going back and, we heard previously in the year Jace Ryan as well, trying to strip the menu back and just keep it simple. I think that's almost their DNA, and when they go away from that, which it is easy to do, and Bryn, you may want to talk to it more being a game driver, but when you're expected to win a game or you come up against an opposition you should score plenty of points against, so often you always race to the edge rather than doing the work up front first. So it is a common mistake, but I was surprised, but I agree with Bryn, we do need to give a little bit of credit to the Italian defensive effort because they did really pressure us in and around that contact area and made it really hard for us.
Bryn, Dean Budd texted me, he was very happy with the way that the Italians had approached that. You know, he was very proud of the team. But going back to that question, you know, when the team has obviously on a couple of occasions, at least once in the first half and once in the second half, gone one off, had success, made their way through the line, why on earth would you not continue to do that?
It was a passage of play in that first and even the second half where they were able to, pick and go straight through the middle, be able to get good go-forward ball, and then being able to, tighten them up. And then even for the tries that I saw with Will Jordan, and maybe in the 33rd minute, I think Wallace Satiti gives that offload and they don't score, but they were able to actually get outside maybe the 5th or 6th defender. That's where the kind of break of the defence was in the Italians. So I think they had a plan in terms of what they thought they were going to get, but through that breakdown pressure of the Italians, they weren't getting to where they probably needed to and not seeing the pitches that they wanted to see in that short side attack. And then, like you said, solution-wise, they probably found a little bit more pay going through the teams with what we kind of saw with the Blues. They picked and go, went through the middle, able to get over the advantage line, which then in turn opened up a little bit wider because then the defence has to come tight, they're not set, and then we're able to get to that kind of 5th, 6th, 7th defender, which we saw with Will Jordan's trial with Rico Ioane running that good line. So they adapted on the run, but I think in turn, they just didn't get what they wanted physicality-wise in that first half, especially with how much pressure the defensive breakdown the Italians did in that first half.
You've been a captain on plenty of occasions. There's obviously a lot of communication that comes on the field from water boys and whoever else these days. When you're in that position and decisions have got to be made to get yourself back on track, what do those conversations look like in a modern football context? Because it's not just the captain saying, this is where we need to go now.
No, not at all, but I agree there is communication channels, obviously with water. Normally it's another coach that will, they don't really, well, in the teams, they don't tell you what to do, but they'll just identify the trends that they've seen and articulate it either to the captain, but more often than not, it'll be to the first 5, who's the general. And you have to think that's similar to what has gone on here. Again, I do stress, there was, I don't want to be disrespectful to Italy, but similar to the Japan game, like sometimes when you get in your head that you should win by plenty, does Wallace Satiti throw that offload against South Africa at Ellis Park, or does he just take that one more ruck and then eventually wear them down to score in the opposing corner? I just think, you know, it's not scoreboard pressure, but there is that pressure to beat them by plenty, and I think that just got in the way here.
Yeah, based on what we've seen this season from handling errors and decisions made around offloads, they probably would have thrown that pass because it appears to be one of the serious areas that they need to work on.
Yeah, potentially, but it was just never, like, if anything, it was Mark Talea was on the inside, and I just think, I don't know, it just seemed like there was always a rush to score, and it's a similar discussion we had last week, and after the Japanese game, we saw, probably even, at least in the Japanese game, they started to get into motion and scored points, whereas this just never came.
Brent, let's say there's an offload going on. You're Wallace Satiti, you've got a person outside, a person inside. The communication and the decision-making in that area, I mean, you're probably hearing 2 voices, you're probably getting a little bit excited. When you're the person with ball in hand, how do you go about making the right decision?
Yeah, peripheral vision. You kind of have an understanding of who's inside and who's outside you. So I think first and foremost, it's understanding that there is someone outside you, that there is going to be an offload, and then the communication is probably a big one as well. If Wallace is going through and he's hearing, pop right, or behind right, and you're hearing those kind of action words, it makes it a lot easier. And I think one thing as well, I think Razor touched on it actually a lot when we were at the Crusaders, when we had the kind of unforced errors in our game, is that you wanted to sight your target. So if you're able to, see not just through your vision, through your peripheral vision, you're able to actually get a real good target and send someone in that space to then give that pass, knowing that they're right there and there. If you're having those kind of offload and a lot of turnovers, so those are the kind of things that do help with offloads. But at the same time, execution-wise, it's based on the individual. Individual has to get there right, and there's only so much things that players can say, you can see. At the same time, you've got to be able to try execute. And, you know, unfortunately, it's been a common trend that we've touched on a lot this year with high error rates and not being able to get the ball in and finish off, you know, tries or even half line breaks that we have done throughout the year in our attack.
It's really critical that you win the collision. And Wallace was obviously in front and through that collision, but he was in an awkward spot. So what Bryn said there around sighting the target is massive, because if you can't see them, then normally you're probably not going to be able to, you know, pass them unless it's a fluky. But it's also critical for the player that is in support as an offload line that, one, he can receive an offload, two, he can clean that ruck, or three, the player goes down and can pop pass. So there is a responsibility to give those clear comms. And lines open, I get it, eager to score points, and they're backing a man's skill set who did an amazing offload against England only a few weeks earlier. But in terms of that specific question, you've got to win that collision, you've got to sight the target, you've got to have your teammates in a position where they can do the three jobs, and then you make a decision.
The pop pass is an interesting point, because I feel like these days you've got quite a lot of time to throw that pop pass, don't you? You really do. They do give a lot of leeway on the ground now. Sometimes you see a person on the ground for seconds and seconds and seconds before the pass comes, and in the past that would have been deemed a pass off the ground. Now it's it's not.
I think even here, that was the option.
Yeah.
And I know Captain Hindsight, greatest superpower, but that was the option for me, because there were no Italian defenders. They would have had to have come all the way around to enter the ruck correctly, which means they would have time for the pop pass, and there's no way they could have got around and tackled, you know, anyone in that time. So, but a split-second decision, and I mean, he's got history of being very successful at it, but that was one that sort of just stemmed that momentum that we were talking about.
Yeah.
The original discussion probably just took them away and distracted them from what was working.
Yeah. Between the 50-50 offloads and the issues with ball handling, the All Blacks had the second most turnovers per game in the autumn window. So we're looking at 14 turnovers a game in comparison to the Springboks, who you'd average 12, Fiji were the best with 8, Japanese the worst with 18. New Zealand is not in the top half of teams within the autumn window for maintaining the ball, Bryn. It is just consistently given back. And maybe that lets you have your scrum go well because you get to practice it. But in the meantime, they're losing a lot of chances.
It has been a common trend for the boys this year, but I think we are having multiple opportunities. We've talked around a lot this year, the defenders' beatings, the offloads, the line breaks. We've had a lot of that, and we actually probably aren't kicking a lot. I think a lot of the teams in the early part of the year, you know, had that kind of high 30s or low 30s was the kind of kicking range to be able to build momentum. So we've actually taken probably 10 kicks off where we've previously been in those kind of test matches. So we are asking a lot of questions. Our attack is actually breaking a lot of teams, but the high error rate is probably coming from we are playing a little bit more now. So sometimes that's the risk that you do run if you're not kicking as much. Your execution, especially under pressure and probably under fatigue. I probably think the Italians is not one that was under fatigue, because it was very stop-start, but throughout the year, that's probably the challenge for the All Blacks moving forward, is if we are going to hold on to the ball under immense pressure and under fatigue, we've got to try to be able to, I guess, finish and execute a lot better than probably we did this year.
If you're going into a review, if you've had a turnover count of 10 or less, then you've probably had a good day, because you've got to expect some errors, and you don't want to take players' instincts out of them. Like, don't coach through fear of making a mistake versus, you know, want to back your skill set. But, you know, there are certain things you've got to meet, like winning the collision, like sighting the target. Those sorts of things, you've got to do that to then make an informed decision. So 14, if that was down to 10, you know, like, that probably would solve a lot of the issues where there's been frustration in the 22 and not finishing opportunities. And potentially there just needs to be a balance of how far you want to push the pass, especially in the 22. So I can sort of live with them further out, but in the 22, if you watch South Africa or, you know, teams that have had success when they enter the 22, they just roll the sleeves up. They go to the pick and go. That, you know, like the Blues, you knew what they're doing, but you're eventually going to run out of defenders. They will wear you down, and having that patience mindset in the 22 may be something they want to, you know, look at, especially with these coaches. Because if you think about the Crusaders, like, they were so methodical in the 22. Like, you knew what they were going to do as well, but they still managed to get over the try line.
But to some degree, they've moved away from what the Crusaders were going to do, Bryn. The Crusaders were going to go to the corner and line-out drive you. and going to the corner and line-out driving appears to be the one trend this year that is being reversed.
That is one way you're able to score points and have a high success rate. But I think, look, the breakdown is just the biggest thing. If Cam Roygar can have that kind of platter in terms of having very fast ball, having runners off him, with his sniping ability that we saw on the weekend and even in his career, it opens up a way more, better attack to be able to be more efficient in the 22-metre zone. So, I thought it was probably the worst breakdown performance that we've had this year. We've been pretty good, I think, gain line percentage-wise, and even been able to, clean rucks and get that quick ball. But, unfortunately, Jip's touched on a lot throughout many years on this podcast. Breakdown and winning that physicality battle is really important. And the Italians on the weekend, they had a very, very... their game was wanting to stop that quick ball at any means necessary, whether sometimes they were sending in an extra guy at the ruck just to be able to try and blitz through, or have a little jackal to try and slow that ball down. So I think the breakdown was probably the biggest losing of us on the weekend.
Now, we have got Scott HANSEN for you on the show. We did pre-record this interview at the end of last week because it was the only time we could really align with the All Blacks assistant coach to have a good yarn. So we haven't got into the errors that happened within that Italy game, whether it's the ball handling or the lack of ruck play. But we've had a chance, I suppose, to look back on 2024 and what that year has been like for the new All Black coaching group. Scott, look, 14 tests this year. It's been a long year, 5 long weeks on tour at the end of it. How do you feel you've come through it all?
Excited, mate. It's one of those ones, Ross, where you're focused on test to test and you're bouncing through your weeks. It's not something yet as an individual or a coaching group that I've looked back on and gone, well, how was the year? But overall, mate, a really exciting year. Hell of a privilege to be involved with this group around these young men and see them represent their country so well.
G'day, Scott. Do you feel this season will help you in preparation to enhance the legacy in 2025?
If you have a quick snapshot of what's happened this year already around the 12 debutants, bringing in some new exciting players into the All Black environment, adding different layers around relationships and the growth. I feel we've all been focused on doing that daily, weekly, by test. You live, you learn, you grow. Next year for sure, mate, like anything, like any job, like any environment, you're going to learn your lessons, you're going to sit back, adjust to how you can even be better. I think everyone in this All Black team, both players and management, is always focused on that. We understand the true privilege of being within the All Black environment. We understand the legacy, but also the excitement around this is our time. So definitely lessons from the year and looking forward to going forward with this very, very exciting group.
That's interesting because people always talk about this 4-year cycle, but as a coaching group, while you try to embed all of your ideas and the ways you want to do things, do you think in that way, years 1 through 4?
Yeah, good question again. You focus on each test, that's for sure, but in the background, you've got an understanding of where you're going to grow your game and what that looks like. You're going to understand where your layers can be, where we need to be at this stage. So our biggest challenge is going to be how we evolve. And a massive part of that is our selection around getting All Blacks to that level where when you're hitting into World Cup cycles and the like, they've got experience, whether that be 30, 40, 50, 60 tests. And the experience, Ross, is not just a test. The experience is being in a corner during a test match and learning, she doesn't get out of that as well as I should have. The experience is in that moment, in that line-out throw, I didn't quite nail and or I did. What's the experience from that? So we often talk about tests, but I believe it's contextual and elemental around what that is during it. Bringing a team up to Europe, conditions, in Paris the other night. Wow, what an environment. Okay. Peter Lakai, just a little taste of that. So we'll build all those experiences as we get into that cycle essentially and what we're doing currently.
When we talk about a guy like Peter Lakai, who's a rookie at test level and on a big, long 5-week tour like this, do you put a lot of coaching resource into making sure they can handle the intensity of that environment as well as the rugby itself?
Yeah, we had Peter come in during our camps in New Zealand. James, you were there during one of them. Ross, around that, the guys that look after you the most will be your teammates. So it's an ARPIES severe that grabs you, you room with them for a week. They talk to you, they tell you the stories around their past, their experiences, they guide you through. In regards to coaching, these are good players. So in a lot of instances, it's just getting them to understand our game plan and our like, and just leaving them to feel it a little bit. The players are always the ones that will help the player around what it feels like on a tour, hotels and the like. And we're very lucky because we've got a caring group. You can see the shining eyes of the young All Blacks this year, and that's really exciting. But in behind that is the experience, the leadership group that is setting these guys up for success. So it's been awesome to see. How can a Peter Lakai not learn from an ARPIES Severe or a Sam Kane and a Wallace Atili being the same?
Obviously, international rugby is won and lost up front. I'm a big fan of that. And there's a man that certainly has caught everyone's eye, filling some pretty big boots in Whiteluck and Retallick heading overseas. Tupou Va'i, defensively, on attack, he has been exceptional at his core role.
You walk past the team room most nights and you see those boys in there going through their line-out D, and you see all the work that goes in the background. You see the meetings that the players will have themselves and what they're driving. Yeah, you're right. Toops has been phenomenal. He's a young man that's been given a bit of space. He's gone through his trade. He's had some very, very good All Blacks to learn from, and Gordy and Sam. And this is his year where he's out there. He's getting more game time. He's grown as a leader. He's a very special player. When you look at his game in regards to metrics and KPIs within our game, he's always leading around what that looks like. Up front, the ability to carry, clean, dominate his area has been phenomenal. And I agree with you, mate. He's had an outstanding year. Then again, I have the privilege to see it in the background, and that's walking past a lot of rooms at night, and those boys are in there talking around lineouts and scrums, and you just got to love it, don't you, James?
You do, you do. On that note, I was privileged enough to spend that time with the All Black squad and yourself in Wellington earlier this year. And as I was heading to the gym in the early hours, I think it was just after 5 a.m, you were in there receiving passes from both TJ Piranara and Cortez Ratama. You now have Cam Roigard coming back. You've got Noah Hotham as well. The depth in this 9 position is extremely exciting.
Yeah, depth, experience, really excited for us as a group to have those players, and then you've got a Finn also. So yeah, really excited around that group. The performance the other night for Cam against Dupont. You know, Dupont's been a player I've been looking at for years. And he's a player that I've sent a million clips of to other nines around. Have a look how special he is, look at his game and that. But then to see Cam go out the other night and play the way he did, and his performance, the way he challenged the defence, and all the layers that we have. We've got TJ here on tour also, that they're still getting up, James, in the morning and going for their passes in the mornings, and they're still committed to getting better. It's an absolute privilege to work with them and for them. Really excited for our young nines and where we'll be when we started the conversation around World Cup cycles. And I believe by the time we get to the World Cup, we'll have 2/3 very, very good All Black nines.
And Scott, we've got a question from your mate Bryn Hall on that as well. He wants to know whether or not you're looking for a particular kind of thing in a 9. Are you looking for X-factor brilliance in one particular skill set, or all-round brilliance across the board?
When you get to this level, there must be a point of difference in your game. And then what our role as coaches is to grow their point of difference, so there's variables in it. So they're able to adjust during a game, contextually, whatever that may be, regards conditions and their skill sets. Fundamentally, we know it's pass. Fundamentally, we know it's putting the ball in front of your forward pack. The biggest thing I've always had with young 9s and 10s is them understanding how to play the game with momentum or without. And it's the without's the bit in New Zealand we've got to continue to grow. So you look at, for example, the New Zealand 20 trials and the like, and you look at a game and then the halfbacks in those trials may not put in a box kick, because everything in New Zealand's around running the ball and shifting it from all areas of the field. And then we get into the competitions, and it's France and England and they're putting us in corners, and we're asking our nines to get us out of corners with an effective, efficient box kick, as an example. You know, all our nines have got beautiful skill sets around it. Our biggest challenge, and it's something I continue to look at around where DuPont's grown his game, is he's always had the ability to influence his moment, but the growth in his game has been he makes other people better around him.
Funnily enough, you know, Bryn, who knows you so well, probably knew what you were going to say there, because his follow question kind of relates to that. Kiwis do not like to see kicking of the ball. Kiwis like to see running with the ball. So could you explain how a nine, or other positions in fact, can take a kick and allow that to enhance your attack?
One creates the other. It's the long kick that creates the short kick. It's the tight attack that creates the wide attack. So again, just coming back to that ability to know where you are in the moment, know how you're reshaping a team. But our ability to play with ball in hand is one of our greatest strengths. And that comes from our forward pack, our skill set in the forwards and the like. You know, any team that's facing the All Blacks defensively has to acknowledge, if not all our forwards around ball carry and skill sets at the line. So we've got to continue to grow that. And that's going to help any nine when we're giving them those kind of momentum moments.
If you look at one area that has improved from the beginning of the year through to this end of year tour, the last 20 minutes, you really seem to have found your mojo with who you're selecting off that bench, but getting the impact at the right time.
Yeah, it's grown through the year, hasn't it, James? You know, you look around some of the challenges we've had, and most recently with Pussy offer coming on around what that gives us in the set piece, and that allows us to use that as a weapon essentially later on, which allows us to come down the field. We've seen that most recently. The impact from the bench is massive, because a lot of your game plan can at times be built around when those boys come on and the influence that the start has had for them. So you think about if you want to hold position, where teams will be in regards to fatigue. So you need athletes that come on that can shift the ball to space, carry the ball to space. Our layers and our growth this year have been just doing the simple things well as well. A line-out throw, a scrum and the like. So we've grown that capacity this year, but it's always going to be the challenge for us.
Scott, we appreciate the effort your team's put in the losses and the wins this year. Hasn't always been a perfect performance. There's been highs and lows, but there's no doubt the effort has certainly been there along the way. So thank you for your time twice this year and joining us on the show.
One thing I will say, whether you cut this out or not, is the All Blacks are seen on a sad day a lot from Kiwis. They're seen around a performance, but they're not always able to see, obviously, how they perform and represent New Zealand during the week. How they get on a bus, say good morning to the bus driver, how they get off and clean the bus, how they come into a hotel, clean it, the feedback they're given from the hotels around being good, humble young men. So as much as it's a sad day, and that's the bit I get, but it's a group that New Zealand should be really proud of around how they represent our people, both on and off. And we've got the great privilege of going into environments and having avid fans here, and you'd be really proud around how the boys respond to that, and also the care and love they have for the All Black jersey. So yeah, it's been a privilege to be a part of this year.
So, Chip, if you look at what Scott HANSEN had to say, and you look at the fact they've won 10 out of 14, it hasn't been brilliant. They were close against South Africa and South Africa. They were close against France and Paris, who were two of the benchmark teams. They beat Ireland. How do you see this year? Is it a pass mark?
Look, it's a hard one, because I think for the expectation that came with this coaching group, I think everyone maybe just thought they'd win everything, and it would be, I suppose, normal systems go. But the one thing I would say is, I agree with you. I think, South Africa was always going to be hard, and it would have been great to go 1-1, but you can sort of understand that. The French game as well, I think if you look at even the two in South Africa and the French game, we were actually in control of those outcomes, and I think that's what will be the frustrating part, is they put themselves in a position to win and just couldn't nail it down. The RG game's probably the biggest blemish. It's not one anyone expected. Argentina have been great this year. They're definitely an improved outfit. But at home, I think it sort of is the one that would probably take the scorecard down to probably that sort of C+. For the season and what's expected of the All Blacks.
C+ is a pass, but not a good pass.
Yeah, because I think there's developed a lot of new All Blacks. There is, I suppose, embedding new systems and new voices. There would have been a lot of clutter early, so I think they've stripped all that back. So I think they would even say it's a pass, but it's not what they wanted going into this season.
For Bryn, I kind of feel like they're in very much the same place that they left off last year. They haven't gone forward, they haven't really gone backwards in a lot of ways. They're kind of in a similar zone for me, Bryn. What do you think?
Well, I think results-wise, we're probably touching on, like there's probably a few ones there that we thought, like the Argentina game was probably one that, really hurts on those 14 test matches. Probably could have split 1-1 with the South Africans, and then I think the French one was one that got away. So, look, I think we have evolved in a lot of areas. Look, if you look at our scrum, Ross and Jip, look, I think it's probably one of the best in the world at the moment. It's something that we can build momentum off, which we saw against the Italians, and we've seen some great depth there now with our propping stocks. And then you even look at the likes of our locks that have come through. We lost Sam Whitelock and Brodie Ratello, Tupou Vai and Patrick Tupou have come through in terms with Sam Dowie debuting as well. And we also lost Aaron Smith, arguably our best halfback that's ever played, and probably arguably the best halfback in the world, having now 3 nines, along with with TJ being there leaving. But we've also got Noah Hotham and we've got Cam Roygaard and Cortez Ratsimi who've really come on nicely in that spot. So if we're talking around selections of like where we probably needed our depth, that was really tough in terms of post-World Cup. I think we've added a few little gems with those guys, and we haven't even mentioned Wallace Atiti and how he's been the number 6. So, and then I talk around our attack. I think our attack's been really good in terms of having multiple opportunities. We've seen the line breaks, the defenders' beatings, and a lot of those times in test matches, we're actually making a lot of opportunities where we probably looked 24 months ago, we were seriously asking ourselves, like, what does this All Black attack look like? Why are we not making line breaks? Why are we not playing the New Zealand footy? So I think there has been a lot of improvements, but I think when it does come to being in the All Blacks, and Jip touches on it a lot, our expectation is to win every test match. And I think with what the coaches were that came into the environment, the expectation was probably to go pretty close to 12 test matches out of 14. And I think getting one over in South Africa would have been important. That Argentinian one hurts, and I think the French one as well was one that we probably should have won. So I'm going to be probably going to go B-, just with more so the attacking way that we have attacked this year, the involvement and the growth in that. And I think the positions that I touched on with new guys coming in and really stamping their mark on international footy has been great for the All Blacks this year.
I totally agree. I think there's parts of their game that big improvements, especially the set piece and the important nature. The line-out defence as well, I think, has been massive. And as I said, the one positive is all the losses were due to our inaccuracy versus just being beaten. And I think that is a big point of difference in terms of looking at the year. It could have looked totally different. It could have been 100%.
But it wasn't.
No.
So is that something that can be improved easily? Because it appears to be the same problems week after week.
Absolutely, you can. And it would be another year in the saddle and just understanding terminologies and calls and structures. Like there was a lot. It's always, when there's a change in the coach, there's always a lot to sort of intake, and then making sure you can make those decisions at a fast pace at an age where international rugby is probably the best it's been in a long time in terms of you don't know who's going to win when you're watching on the weekend.
And just don't underestimate the leadership that we have lost. You're looking guys like Aaron Smith, Sam Whitelock, Dane Coles, guys were there for a very long time, and I guess understanding what it takes to be a footy player in high pressure situations, and I guess having that IQ in the group as well and losing that. So look, I just think, sometimes when you lose those kind of boys, I think what we have shown, the guys that have come through, the guys that I touched on, I think another year in the settle with Razor, and I guess those players understanding 12 months of footy of being in All Blacks and that environment with those coaches, it'll set us up better, I think, for next year.
It is a particularly tough period in international rugby to be on top.
Yeah, it's the tightest it's ever been. I think that's what's made it incredibly entertaining and engaging. Even when the All Blacks aren't playing, I probably shouldn't use myself as an example, but I feel like there's more eyes on rugby, whether your team's playing or not, because of the tight nature, and that is exactly what you sort of want in the pointy end, and it is good for our game. Obviously, we want New Zealand to win all the time, but it is a very, very tough ask. I mean, South Africa didn't even do it, and they are the best team. It's a generational team. They had 2 slip-ups as well, so it's not a given that you can just turn up and win.
Speaking of South Africa, World Player of the Year, Pieter-Steph du Toit, absolutely deserved every moment of that. What a tremendous player he is.
Yeah, and if you look at the year, he's covered so many positions. I think his performance at lock against Australia was just a massive tip of the cap to his ability to be versatile. I know he's a big man, but it's a total different aspect. So, look, I don't think you could complain with any of the 4 nominees, but he was definitely one that stood out. I obviously made a case for Delande, but he wasn't even in the mix. And I think we all know Colby's ability, but Pieter-Steph is, out and out, clearly the best player in the world at the moment.
Straight up relentless, Bryn.
Oh, I tell you what, he's one guy that you wouldn't want to see. So I know he plays Japan, rugby over here in Japan, so I'll be trying to stay well clear of him when he's playing. So, and he's been doing it for a couple of years, right? Like I think even post World Cup, the previous World Cup in 2019, he was talked about in this kind of light. So for him to be able to consistently do this year in and year out, we obviously touched on Delande, who we thought had a tremendous year and is probably an unsung hero in that team. But look, no worries about Pieter-Steph being player of the year. But how good Anton Dupont being 7th player of the year probably just adds to his legacy of what he's doing. That's just my chance to obviously talk about him. Chipper loves Malcolm Marx, who's in that dream team, but Anton Dupont, geez, what a player, winning that 7th award as well.
And Ellie Kildan, when you watch the women's game this year, has been phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Well deserved there.
And she's absolute all-out gas. Like, she's an incredibly fast athlete, and she does make other players look silly at times with that pace and her ability to sort of maintain that speed while still changing direction.
There were some weird things going on in that dream team, though. Really weird things. Bizarre that Damien McKenzie is the 10, considering he's not the top 10 for New Zealand. That is quite strange, I thought, when you come down to naming them. But when you look around the world, it's a transitional period with 10s across the board, right, Bryn? You've got Noah Lolesio, who's still making his way there. The South Africans are playing 3 or 4 different 10s in one season. So I just wondered whether maybe the right person for that job, Bryn, was Finn Russell or Marcus Smith. I wasn't sure Damien McKenzie was the guy there. I thought that was odd.
Yeah, yes and no. Look, we have touched on Damien and how many good things that he has done, and he has been, played the majority of the Test matches for us this year, and we touched on how many times he can be able to do things that put us in really good positions to try and win games, whether it's through his goal kicking at multiple times within the season, his ability to be able to attack. Now, we did touch on, obviously, to be able to try and get rid of those unforced areas that probably lost him the job in the back end of the year. But look, he did a lot of good things throughout the year. But I do think Marcus Smith is probably one guy that I thought possibly could have done it. If you talk around improving and I guess going to that next level, being the 10 in England, his season started in the June Tests, where he played very well against the All Blacks, and then I think in this autumn series has probably taken his game to another level. And I think George Ford has been in and around there and is seen as a leader within that group. But you'd have to think Marcus Smith now going into this World Cup, and even the British and Irish Lions, along with Finn Russell, would be very close to being the number 10 for that team and for the next year in Australia. Yeah,
look, I think the performance probably against Ireland may have helped a lot. And sometimes when these awards come around, recent performances, whether you like it or not, do have an impact on the decisions. But if you look at the year, I'm sure there's a category. If you look at the year as a whole, each team hasn't really had a nailed down 10 other than maybe Scotland and England. So he has spent a lot of time in that jersey. He's had some very strong performances, and maybe they feel strong enough to warrant the selection. But I mean, when you think about it, it is quite hard to think, okay, who else can you put a case for? Because South Africa rotate their 10s, every 2 seconds, so it's kind of hard to.
So then Ramos.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But I know because he's not starting at the end of the year, I still think that Irish performance showed how good he can be in that position when he's just really clear and direct with the way he plays.
The other interesting one was the fact that they didn't name an open side flanker. I'm not sure if they realised that South Africans play their traditional blind side flanker in the 7 jersey, because seeing Pablo Matera and Pieter-Steph du Toit in there, along with Caelan Doris, there was no specialist fetcher in there either.
Yeah, I don't think, Khaleesi probably hard done by as well, not to be in there. And then if you do look at it from an open side point of view, I think it's one of Sam Cane's best year in international rugby. He's been a hell of a force and a big, I suppose, weapon in terms of those defensive breakdowns, making a number of tackles, the amount of rucks he cleans. So, you know, there's probably two options there that would maybe make that loose forward trio a better fit. But I suppose they're trying to find a player to reward the, you know, Argentinian side that has clearly improved this season. But if you were to go for the top 15, you'd have to think a Khaleesi or a Kane would be there.
It's fraught with danger, these things, right? They're
You can never
always
win.
bizarre.
You can never win.
You can never win, but you can't be throwing around, okay, let's give them a spot. Just
I
because.
don't know. I don't know if that's the case.
But it often
Pablo,
feels that way, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, Pablo's had a strong year, but
Yeah.
if you look at terms of match-defining performances, Khaleesi's been massive.
Yeah, and then if you combine it with Peter Steff,
I suppose they just don't want to pick the whole South African team.
they probably should this year, to be fair. What do you think, Bryn?
Oh, look, I think you do look at kind of Pablo and, you know, possibly Wallace Satiti. You know, with the year that he had, he was named breakout player of the year, but I think maybe just didn't get the early test matches at the end of the year. But, you know, he'd be kind of one. Touched on Sam Cane. Look, I agree with Chip. He had an outstanding year, and it's funny that, you know, Artie Severe, who was player last year, isn't named, but I think Kalen Doris had an outstanding year as well. But I think the backline's pretty good. We've touched on Damo. I look, the Delande and Creo are two of the best midfielders, especially in that pairing right now. And then you've got Colby, James Lowe, and then you've got Will Jordan, who I think, you know, some people might think he didn't play there at the start of the year, but I think in that autumn series showed, I guess, his ability to be 15, and hopefully it continues for 2020, 2025.
I'd love to know how many players have worn a reserve jersey and made the team of the year. Because Malcolm Marx comes off the bench for the Springboks, but he's the starting hooker in the team of the year. So I don't. Surely that hasn't happened before.
Well, I mean, that's what happens with the Crusaders, right? When they pick an All Black team, isn't it? Is that what happens? Or it used to be anyway. Never mind. Okay, let's move on to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod Awards for the year. Thank you very much to all of you who sent in an email to aotearoarugbypod@sky.co.nz with suggestions for awards. There were a lot of really, really good ones in there, and one of you will get the Eden Park Paris prize pack. Let's get through a few of those before we close the show out. Now, I just wanted to start with an award. This isn't from one of you, just an award that should be given, and I'm going to go to you, Chip, because there's never a front rower of the year award, and a front rower never wins the player of the year award. There's been, I think Keith Wood won it as a hooker years ago, but who's your front rower of the year?
Tyrell Lomax.
Tyrell Lomax.
He's been massive. Like he was huge for them last season in the World Cup, but I feel like he's taken his game to another level. His ability to dominate all his collisions. We've spoken about the improved nature of the scrum. He is a player that has the ability to play, but also isn't one that tries to stamp his authority with, you know, all these carries. He sort of cleans everything up. He cleans the most rucks. He's, you know, sometimes he's been pushed to nearly 80 minutes, you know, which is massive for a tight head in international rugby. So Tyrell Lomax for me.
Nice. Okay, let's move on to a couple of these awards. One of the first ones was from Stephen Gillum, and he said the Whitebait Award. The Whitebait Award, obviously referring to Stephen Donald, for the player who did best to emerge as a solution in some kind of crisis. His nominees were Wallace Satiti or Peter Lakai and Harry Plummer for the Blues. You on board with that, Brenner?
There's a couple of good ones there. Look, I think, we've talked around a lot of international footy, but I'm probably actually just going to go Harry Plummer. Look, I thought the way that he was with the Blues, considering how many injuries they had, and I guess leading the Blues to, I guess, their first title in a long time, a proper title, to get that win was great for them. And I think being rewarded with an All Blacks cap, you know, is much deserved. And it's probably really sad that we're not going to see Harry Plummer. I'm not too sure what the chats are around him going to France, but look, I think in terms of what that Blues team needed and how he was able to play throughout the year, especially to win a title, I'd have to go Harry. But Wallace and Peter, some great performance as well throughout the year, especially Peter in his first debut game as well, second debut game.
If you look at a late call-up like the Whitebait version, I feel like Jackson Garden-Bishop with Wellington winning the NPC, Aidan Morgan originally in the side, but he obviously left to go overseas and take up an offer there, and then obviously a late callback to New Zealand for Jackson, and he was a massive part of that successful Wellington team. So in terms of winning it and going all the way with the glory, you've got Harry Plummer, who I totally agree with, but I also special mention to Jackson Garden Bishop.
Okay, the next viewer award that we've got here is from Carl Martin, a regular emailer. He said set try of the year, set piece try of the year. We love a set piece try, don't we? He says his nomination is Billy Proctor versus Japan. He ran in virtually untouched, very much a dying art.
Yeah, well, yes it is. I suppose defence has dominated international rugby for a while. I do feel like when you look at the defensive stats, that is slowly changing. That was a good option. I had two others that would be cool to consider. I think when the Springboks against Australia did their little throw over, and they eventually scored not really on that play, but that was an interesting play. And then the other one, I think, was Fraser McWright's try against the All Blacks, the overthrow, and he runs straight through and scores. I thought that was, that was Joe Schmidt at his best, and he basically went through untouched.
We saw something similar from Scotland on the weekend, Tuipulotu, that long throw to him, and he just barreled over to score against Australia. What about for you, Bryn?
Yeah, I had two. I think I had, actually in the Six Nations, I had Lorenzo Pani for Italy vs Wales. If you're looking in terms of just being able to not be touched, and especially a dying out offset set attack, it was off a nice line out, and the amount of hands that it went through and the people that they had to get to kind of, sit down and make it difficult for the defence was the Italian game. And then the fullback ends up scoring. Pani scores a beautiful sidestep to score the try in the end. And I also had the Japanese game against the All Blacks. Pretty much a two-phase attack, which you probably don't see a lot, is when Shinobu gave the Naikapula gave the inside ball to Naikapula gave the ball to Shinobu, and then the inside, and Naikapula scores through that hard defence, which is really tough to do in this day and age. So yeah, those would be my two from Italy and the Japanese against the All Blacks.
I reckon there's one, there should be a category for a try that wasn't a try, but Cortez Ratama against Australia. I mean, that was one of the best attacking displays to be called back for a forward pass, but that definitely was one I would have loved to have seen stand.
Nathan Gilling, he asked for best line-out move of the year, and that line-out move where the Boks sent up two jumpers and passed from one to the other against Australia, that was his suggestion. Because we just get the chance to play that again, because it was just a piece of art, we're going to give you the Eden Park Paris pack, a bunch of goodies from Eden Park Paris, who kid us out here on the pod. We'll get that out to you, and hope you enjoy. Next up, most improved player. We love a most improved player. Brenna, who have you got?
Most improved. I actually had Tupou Vai this year. I think with the way that he's played, especially at international level, I touched on earlier with the guys that we lost of Sam Whitelock and Brodie Retallick. I think the way that he's led, and you even hear Jason Ryan in terms of how he describes him and how he's becoming a world-class lock. So yeah, I'd have to go with Tupou Vai. You can't go past Wallace Atiti. Geez, from a guy that wasn't even playing NPC rugby, really starting, to being loaned for the Chiefs in an apprentice role, to be able to start for the Chiefs, become an All Black, and I guess started most of the Test matches in the back end of the year. So yeah, those would probably be my two, Wallace Atiti, but definitely Tupou Vai with the way he's played this year.
Yeah, I think Wallace is given, he is definitely the most improved from where he was at the start of the year to the end. I think Harry Plummer as well needs, he owned that 10 jersey. When Perifeta was out, he took control of that team, and then he remained in that seat. And then, by all accounts, he's been pretty special in that All Blacks environment, as well as the All Blacks 15. I thought he was really, really strong against Munster. So he's a notable mention, but I think you can't go past Wallace Atiti and what he's achieved and where his game started to where it is now.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Ross, I just want to give one more. I wanted to give it to Duplessis Karifi. He's another guy that I thought had an outstanding year, which was rewarded with a call-up for the All Blacks. I think his last couple of games for the Wellington Lions and the way that he was able to influence that group to a win, especially in that final, with what was required from him to be able to get that job done. So you'd have to have Duplessis Karifi in there as well, along with those two others.
Cool. Stephen Hall, who sent in the email, his winner was Tom Wright from Australia, which is also a very good call.
Yeah.
Has been phenomenal this year, really stepped up in that fullback role. So I've got a couple more before we go. First, I think this must be based on Joey's impersonation the other day. Best Steve Hansen impersonation?
I'm not even
not
going
entering
there.
in?
No, I'm not going there.
No.
Far too much respect for that man.
No, neither. And then to go after that, most versatile player of the moment, we mentioned DuPont earlier. earlier as a sevens player. That's who Chris Keyser, I think, or Keyser, however you say it, sent in. Anybody else?
I think, like, internationally, you have to feel Quagga Smith is the most versatile I can think of, but can we go past Ollie Mathis?
Yeah.
He's just gone to the sevens,
Yeah.
he's wing, he's flanker. You know, he's talking about it. He wants to be the most versatile player. Like, he was pretty impressive to do what he did.
Incredible.
Incredible.
Incredible that he's gone to the sevens, not to 15s. I'm sure that someone was going to snap him up. But.
Yeah, I'm sure they wanted to. I think it's more a part of making sure the development is managed.
Yeah, Ollie Mathis, I'm glad you said that, Jep. We've already touched on him and he gave you a follow on Instagram, so it's good to see he's watching our podcast over here in Japan, lads, or just in New Zealand, so good on you, Ollie. But yeah, I'd probably go with Ollie, and then you can't go past Quaha. I think, he's the best in the world. It does it in Japan, does it for the Springboks, but I think most versatile, like I'll say it again, the Pond going to sevens, let's not underestimate how hard that is to be able to win World Player of the Year and then continuous success with France. So yeah, those would be my three.
Well, Ollie Mathis is going to love your Instagram content, especially this. A question here for you before we let you go, Brynner, from Jared Harvey via email. Bryn, is it true that one of your new teammates apologised to you for passing wind?
That is true. I know Jared's actually our translator over here, and there are a few boys that tend to like a bit of passing wind over here. So his name was actually Skulk. So sorry to name and shame you there, my old mate, but yeah, he tends to pass wind quite a few times over here. So yep, it is constant with him, unfortunately. But maybe after this podcast and he sees this and gets a bit of love from the boys, he'll stop immediately.
Pretty sure farting is international language. You don't need a translator to understand exactly what's going on there, right?
You don't. So, yep, they hit the nostrils, that's for sure. So hopefully he can stop that pretty soon. So,
Awesome, Brynner. Hey, well, thank you very much for another great year. We appreciate you dialing in from wherever you are in the world. So thank you very much for all your contributions, mate. Looking forward to doing it again next year.
champion. Cheers, brothers.
Awesome. Chipper, same goes for you.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah.
Thank you as well for all your hard work behind the scenes.
No, appreciate it. Appreciate everyone too who works behind the scenes, behind the cameras, editing, technical directing, vision switching, all of the different things that go on behind the scenes to make this show go to air. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to all of this. So thank you very much to you as well, the viewers, for all of your emails that come through every week to Aotearoa rugbypod at sky.co.nz. Feel free to keep on emailing us. We might be able to include them in the first show of next year. If you've got any suggestions of what you'd want us to do in the show, please let us know. Thank you once again. We will see you next rugby season, at least Southern Hemisphere rugby season. Mā te wā.